Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's Tuesday, July 8th, just after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I thought I'd take a little tour of some of our flower gardens just to show people what condition they're in currently. They're doing fairly well, I'd say. They've come on a little more strongly lately after we've had a bit of rain. There was that initial phase this spring too that it was so cool it took a while for things to get going, but once it warmed up and we got some rains, things have really started to take off. So let's see what the gardens look like. We'll start here with what I call the pergola garden. So here's the overview of this little garden. It's not very big, only about 8 feet by 20 feet maybe, beside the pergola here. So arching up onto the pergola off this little stand here is our trumpet vine, which has been here for a number of years. And it's just the last few years it's actually started to bloom well. And it has a lot of little buds coming on it this year already. Here's an example of some of the buds that have already grown. There's some at the top that are almost about to flush out, I think. Here's our rose campion in full bloom. These are very pretty. The bright, brilliant pink blooms contrasting with the white, gray, green foliage. These come up every year, usually from reseeding themselves. As a campion, they produce many small poppy-like seeds that fall to the ground and then regrow into small seedlings that also look like this with the pale gray leaves, so they're easy to identify. But just shocking pink colors that are very pretty. And here's one of my Mexican sunflowers that I grew from seed later this winter. We've planted a few of these out in the garden. Some of them have already been eaten by some kind of an animal, probably a rabbit or groundhog, I'm not sure. But I really like these. I started growing these a few years ago after I got some at a local flower sale. They get quite tall, over 6 feet tall in some cases, so you do need some space, and they like to be kept moist. They can go through dry periods as long as they have a decent mulch, but if they don't, then they tend to wilt and they can slow down their growth. But if you keep them moist, they grow rapidly and very strongly, and they get covered in masses of these beautiful orange flowers. Here's another one over here, just starting to bloom. And when they get covered, they're very attractive, and the insects think so too. So it's nice to have the insects coming to them. Here's a couple of our Biden's plants that we started growing a few years ago. These are annuals, but they can reseed themselves. And this one I believe is called Blazing Glory. And it is like that. It just blooms all summer long basically. Is actually fairly drought tolerant. But like most plants, they do better if you keep them at least moist fairly often. Here's a salvia that we tried first a couple years ago. This one's called Rockin' Blue Suede Shoes. It's getting a little shaded out now with these large Mexican sunflowers beside it, so I'm not sure if that's going to reduce the numbers of flowers on it, but it's one of these plants that the hummingbirds really like, and you can get these with light blue flowers, dark blue and purple flowers, and even some reddish colored flowers. Very nice. Here we have some osteospermum in a few different colors, a whitish tone and then pale yellow and mauve or purple. This is known as the Grand Canyon mix, is what it says on the tag. So they're quite pretty, and there's a lot more blooms coming. They already had a primary blooming period, and then they sort of had a little rest, and now they're starting to bloom again. You just dehead them and they'll come back. I should have captured these plants when they were really in bloom earlier this summer. These are a few dianthus that reseeded themselves from last year. You can see the one flower here. And they were just covered in profusions of blooms from white to pink to red, gorgeous. I just deadheaded them today, so hopefully they'll come back with a whole new set of blooms before too long. And here on the end, we've got some more rose campion with some of the Blazing Glory Bidens or beggar sticks, and then there's a few sunflowers that just planted themselves, I assume from the bird seed I was feeding to the birds this winter. And you can probably see here that we've got quite a few tiger lilies coming up in this garden as well. Some over on the right corner here, and then sort of straight ahead, and then at the back. And they're almost about to come into bloom. So ideally I would have done this video when they're all out in bloom, and maybe I'll wait for that before I put this video up, but we'll see. You could always wait for something else, and you can always miss things too. And here's one of our early cosmos out in bloom. One of our large black-eyed Susan type flowers, I forget the name of this one, has the beautiful two-tone petals ranging from yellow on the outside to a rich rusty red in the middle, and then of course with the black center. Very pretty when it gets all the flowers out. Okay, we'll just take a look at this little garden now out behind the house. It's one I made, probably 7 or 8 years ago now, and I've planted it in a number of things, perennials and annuals, and it's pretty jam-packed right now with stuff. In the central area, there's quite a bit of bergamot or Oswego tea. Nice reddish pink heads, monarda. At the back, you can see the tall spires of hollyhock. That's a pure white one. Down in front of me here, there's also some annual poppies, the pink ones with the grayish green leaves. And right up close we have Victoria blue salvia. We have several clumps of this false sunflower, Helianthemum helianthoides, I believe it's called. And it's very nice. It grows to about 5 or 6 feet tall, has numerous blooms, nice looking foliage, and they last quite a while too. And it seeds itself readily, but it stays in a nice clump wherever it starts to grow, which I like. Some of these other perennials, like the monarda here, tend to really expand underground by a massive root system. And those perennials sort of irritate me a little bit, just because you have to be constantly trimming them back. Otherwise they take over the whole garden. Got some nice purple cone flowers here. I can't remember the name of these particular ones. I think they were raspberry something. I've also got some white cone flowers and some ones, I think they were called Cheyenne or something. Another look at the Mexican sunflower up close. I have a couple of these in this garden. Got a nice little grouping of these multicolored petunias here. I really like this design with the white and red stripes. I seem to remember them from my childhood, so I have to get a few of those every year just to remind me of my childhood. Here's more of the Bidens that I showed earlier, contrasted nicely with dark purple petunias. And I've got the dark purple petunias extending over here as well, amongst some salvia. And another look at the white hollyhock, very pretty. Okay, here's our trumpet vine on August 11th. After several weeks of drought, it's blooming nicely still. It has deep roots, so it can gather some of the moisture that the smaller plants can't. Putting on a real show this year, the best blooms that we've ever had out of it. Some cosmos in bloom still in the garden. And my Mexican sunflower, now with multiple flower heads in some of the gardens anyhow. Doing quite well as long as it's kept watered. Here are the leaves of it, panning down to some phlox that are semi-shaded and haven't bloomed yet. Another Mexican sunflower up close. And the Glorioso daisy again later on. Some fleabane that have just seeded into the garden as a weed, but I let them bloom because they're nice. Tiger lilies have put on a real show this year. The one garden where they are is just filled with them. They're starting to degenerate now here in mid-August. One of the sunflowers that seeded itself again from the bird seeds, I believe. And this little garden was very orange this year with the tiger lilies and the Mexican sunflowers in bloom at the same time. Purple coneflower. I've got many of these now scattered around most of my gardens. I probably should move a few of them. Red salvia, an annual plant here, but it puts on a good show through the summer and is very drought tolerant. Obviously does better if you give it steady moisture. Some cleomes or spider plant. Here's one of our daylilies in beautiful bloom. Nice striking wine red with yellow centers. And our moonbeam coreopsis, which has been around for years and it's getting infiltrated by various grasses, but it still survives. And Coreopsis tinctoria with its striking red centers and bright yellow flower petal. And one of our pale yellow daylilies, beautiful in its simplicity. And Mexican sunflower in a different garden with purple coneflowers around its base, attracting a monarch butterfly here. And the butterflies really love this plant. We get lots of eastern giant swallowtails, other swallowtails, and monarchs, viceroys, all kinds of butterflies like this plant. And our Rose of Sharon shrub in the backyard is putting out nice bloom right now. Again, most of these clips here were taken a few weeks ago, so in late July. And just one of our flower planters with geraniums and small petunia type plants around the base. Some of my hostas. With begonias planted in between. And another barrel planter with verbena and lobelia mixtures. Some of my large zinnias in bloom. They've had a tough year this year. They don't like the droughts too much. And some more hostas intermingled with some false sunflowers. And my Victoria Blue salvia, which I like, and I put a few in every year just because they're a constant bloomer and can take the heat. And one of my several remaining clematis that I don't give a lot of care to, but somehow managed to survive. Some more of my large zinnias. And here's some more bergamot or Oswego tea. This was when it was in its good state. They've all basically faded away now or become quite run down looking. But this is when they were at their peak and they perform really nice. They put on a beautiful show. And my one garden in particular just has a large mass of them, so they're really nice and the hummingbirds love them. Anyhow, I hope you've enjoyed that overview of the gardens throughout parts of the summer here.